In just about any digital investigation, tracking down hackers, solving a big corporate crime, it all hinges on one single critical step: acquiring the digital evidence. But here's the thing. This isn't like bagging a weapon at a crime scene. No, one wrong move, and your whole case could get thrown out of court. So how do investigators make sure they get it right every single time?
Well, the first, and I mean the most important rule in digital forensics, is actually pretty simple. You never, ever work on the original evidence. Ever. You have to think of that original hard drive like it's a priceless artifact in a museum. You wouldn't just grab it, right? No. You'd study a perfect replica to make sure the original stays absolutely pristine, completely free from contamination.
And that replica, it's called a forensic image. And believe me, it is so much more than a simple copy-paste. It's a perfect, bit-for-bit, sector-by-sector clone of that original drive. Literally, every single 1 and 0 is replicated exactly as it was. This makes it the legal equivalent of the original evidence. So this image, this perfect clone, is what investigators will spend hundreds of hours analyzing, not the original.
Okay, so let's step into what we'll call the digital crime scene. The challenges here are, well, they're totally unique. The evidence itself is invisible, it's volatile, and it's incredibly easy to change by accident.
Which brings up a fair question, right? If you just need the files, why not just, drag and drop them onto a new drive? It seems so easy. But in the world of forensics, that is one of the absolute worst things you could possibly do. And here's exactly why. The simple act of turning on a computer and letting its operating system boot up normally is, from an evidence standpoint, a totally destructive process. It's kind of like letting a herd of cattle trample right through a physical crime scene.
See, when you boot a computer the normal way, the operating system immediately starts reading from and writing to the hard drive. It starts changing crucial metadata, like the last access timestamp on a key file. Just that tiny little change could be enough to destroy someone's alibi or completely mess up a timeline. And boom, your evidence is contaminated. A forensic boot process, on the other hand, uses a special safe boot disk, often an old-school floppy, to stop this from happening. It basically tells the computer, hey, do not touch the main hard drive, and it redirects all those operations somewhere else, leaving the evidence perfectly untouched. So long before we had all the fancy hardware and slick software, investigators had to rely on some truly clever old-school techniques. So let's kind of travel back in time for a second and see how they pulled off this delicate operation with the tools they had. Would you look at that? This simple command line, this was the sterile operating room for early digital forensics. By booting into a safe DOS environment like this, an examiner could connect the evidence drive and a totally blank storage drive to the same machine. This let them perform a direct drive-to-drive acquisition, making absolutely sure that nothing could interfere with the process. Now, the whole process, even though it looks technical, it really just breaks down into a few key steps. First, you create that safe space with the boot disk. Then you physically connect both drives. Now, this next part is crucial. You use a software command to unlock only the new destination drive, making it writable. The evidence drive, it stays completely locked and read-only. And then finally, you hit go, execute the command, and that bit-for-bit cloning process kicks off.
But even with these super precise methods, a new challenge started to pop up. Investigators began to realize that really savvy criminals weren't just deleting files anymore. Oh no. They were actively hiding them in places that most software and even the computer's own operating system couldn't even see.
And that's a fascinating question, isn't it? How in the world do you find something that is intentionally hidden from the very system that's designed to read it? This is where forensic tools had to get even smarter.
The answer was in these secret compartments on the hard drive itself. They're called the Host Protected Area, or HPA, and the Device Configuration Overlay, or DCO. The best way to think of these is like a false bottom in a drawer. They're sections of the drive that are literally made invisible to the computer's basic control system, the BIOS. Now, manufacturers might use them for stuff like recovery data, but a clever criminal, they can use them to hide all sorts of incriminating files.
And this really shows you the constant cat and mouse game of forensics. To find this hidden data, those early tools developed a special direct ATA access mode. What this did was allow the software to completely bypass the computer's BIOS and speak directly to the hard drive's hardware. It was basically asking the drive, hey, show me everything, and I mean everything, including the parts you're not supposed to show anyone. And just like that, the hidden data was revealed.
All right, now let's fast forward to today. While the core principles, don't touch the original, are still the same, the tools that investigators use have become incredibly powerful and sophisticated.
Today, instead of just relying on software to lock things down, we have hardware write blockers. These are physical devices that act like a one-way data valve, making it physically impossible to write anything to an evidence drive. We can now acquire devices remotely over a network, and that old DOS boot disk? Well, it's evolved into powerful Linux-based tools like Linen, which are way faster and more versatile than ever before.
So to wrap all this up, I want to share a quick, true story that really shows just how far investigators will go to acquire evidence. It ties all these concepts together perfectly. It's a fantastic example of what happens when a dead drive absolutely needs to talk.
So the story kicks off with a really serious accusation. A network admin's soon-to-be ex-spouse claimed that he had put a Trojan on his company's network, was capturing passwords, and was even spying on his boss's email, all from his home computer.
And then she provided the key piece of evidence, a single hard drive. She claimed it belonged to her husband and that it was the very one he used for the crime. This drive, it could prove everything.
But, of course, there was a huge problem. The drive was dead. Completely dead. It wouldn't spin up. It was basically a paperweight. The spouse even said that her husband liked to experiment with killing drives with high voltage, and she figured this was just one of his failed experiments.
But here is where the real ingenuity comes in. Instead of just giving up, an investigator tracked down an identical model of that hard drive, bought it, and then carefully transplanted its healthy circuit board onto the dead drive. It was a total long shot, kind of like a digital organ transplant.
And you know what? It worked. The dead drive spun back to life. The investigators were able to perform a complete forensic acquisition, and what they found was absolutely damning. The drive was loaded with emails he had intercepted from his boss's account. Faced with this irrefutable digital evidence pulled from a drive that was supposed to be dead forever, the suspect entered a guilty plea. So that really just leaves us with the final thought. This whole process, from those old-school DOS commands all the way to modern hardware, it's all about answering one fundamental question. In the fight for digital truth, how do you find evidence that's been hidden, deleted, or locked away on a device that is literally designed to keep its secrets? Well, the answer seems to be a mix of relentless persistence and some pretty brilliant technology.